Hello everyone, it's Dylan from Yugioh Everything, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh! VRains episode review. This time, we will be discussing episode 23 of Yu-Gi-Oh! VRains, Genomes Giant, the first part of the duel between Dr. Genome and Go Onizuka. Great to see Go Onizuka back, or should I say, Dark Onizuka, because he changed his whole entertainment name, his whole persona at the beginning of this duel, kind of in the middle of this duel, I think actually during his first turn, which was definitely interesting to see. So general impressions, I enjoyed the episode. I thought that, honestly, I loved the design of Dr. Genome's monsters. I loved the designs of his monsters, and obviously that's just an opinion. There's probably some people that hated the designs, but I loved the design of Gothic Clone and the design of that Darwin monster. Those were his two big Link monsters. And the Gothic, I just thought it worked well with his whole persona, Dr. Genome. This was obviously the first time we've really seen him. This was obviously not his debut episode, but really his debut episode, because while he did a good amount of things in 22 to kind of introduce us to him, this was really the episode where we learned more about his goals, more about his whole persona. And if I had one complaint in the episode, it was, his monsters, while that was like one of my big positives, it was him himself. I thought that his dialogue was very obsessed with DNA, which I guess if that's obviously the route they want to go with his character, that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to criticize, whatever route or whatever motivations they want to give a character unless it's really horrible. And if he's like the mad scientist of the Knights of Hanoi or one of the mad scientists, I literally have no issue with that at all. That's perfectly fine. That fits his motives perfectly. But I just wish that he talked more about the Knights. I wish he talked more about maybe like his role in the Knights and, linking it all back together. I felt that was kind of missing in this episode, where like and every time he talked, it was always about DNA, the strongest DNA. And by the end of the episode, we were like, okay, dude, we get it. You're obsessed with DNA. But if he linked once, like what he does with the DNA for the Knights of Hanoi, obviously that might be classified. But even if he gave a hint, or he just said something literally like, I'm the mad scientist of the Knights of Hanoi, or I'm a researcher for the Knights, that would have been fine enough. But unless I'm forgetting an instance, I don't think he brought up the Knights of Hanoi once. I actually had to remind myself after the episode was over that Dr. Genome was even a part of the Knights of Hanoi, because if you just watched this episode and you did not watch episode 22, you would have no idea, just unless you want to make an inference based off his clothing, that he was a member of the Knights of Hanoi. You would think he's just either some one-off duelist or just some, crazy guy in a different organization. So I wish that he brought up the Knights of Hanoi a little more in his dialogue, but that's the only complaint. And honestly, it was a really negative one, or a really minor one, not a really negative one, a really minor one. It didn't really ruin the overall enjoyment of the episode. While I loved Genome's monsters, I loved the goat-looking monster that I just mentioned before, which the clone one, which I thought worked really well with him, because obviously with DNA, he wants to clone people and make better versions of the DNA that he's getting. He wants Go's DNA and he wants Playmaker's DNA, because he wants to try to make a better version of Playmaker, of Go, which is actually a pretty scary thought, especially in Playmaker's instance, because he's pretty a flawless, he is a flawless duelist at this point. He has not put a foot wrong in any duel. He's undefeated. So I don't really know how you get too much better than that. But the clone monster worked because obviously he wants to clone, and this is a monster that gets the attack points of any monster that it's battling, and it can't be destroyed once per turn. That was awesome. And the other Link monster was Darwin. I forget the first part of that name, but the last part was Darwin, which is obviously a reference to Darwin's theory, which is basically survival of the fittest, which also fits Genome's motivations, because he wants to only get the DNA of the strongest people. He wants to make... Well, we don't really know what he wants to make. We don't really know his motivations past that, but he just wants the DNA of the strongest duelists, of the strongest human beings out there. And so obviously having a monster named Clone and having a monster named Darwin worked perfectly. And I love the design. The design for both of these monsters kind of looked like experiments gone wrong, which I think is kind of, a darker side of the DNA testing, but that's kind of what it is. If you're cloning, you're mixing and matching, and obviously you're going to have experiments, I guess you can say, that do go horribly wrong, and so you're going to have creatures that kind of look this way. So even though Genome is supposed to be this, genius DNA guy, you can still tell by some of these monsters that that, well, DNA is not, cloning and DNA testing, it's not necessarily foolproof, because obviously DNA testing, for the most part, is foolproof, but what he wants to do is create more people out of this DNA, and obviously there's going to be some setbacks, and that's kind of what these monsters demonstrated. So I like that whole aspect. I really enjoyed that aspect. And another thing that I loved, I think this episode had some of the best attack animations we have seen. What I loved that they did was they got rid of the whole singular stream in these speed duels, and what I mean by that is up until now you had to ride on the singular purple stream. So what this new director does is he creates this new data storm, I guess you can call it, this new duel field where you have these black tornadoes rise, and now everything is accessible through your D-board, and that just gives so much more fluidity and so much more room to operate for these duelists, and I think that really, really paid off in this episode. I also thought the animation was really, really good. I mean, this was one of the animation has just gotten better and better, in my opinion, and I thought this was a really, really well animated episode. Some of the close-ups of Genome's face, some of the close-up of Go's face, and again, just the attack animations were really, really awesome. So this episode definitely did have a lot of positives. As for Go as a character, because I've already kind of talked about Genome, there wasn't much more to talk about him. As for Go as a character, I enjoyed this episode, especially from his perspective, because as, again, a former WWE fan, when I saw the summary and I saw it said heel turn, I knew exactly what they were referring to. Literally, that is a wrestling term, and Kusanagi even says it's a pro wrestling term. So Go Onizuka changes his entire style of dueling. This was also a very unique duel because, while I think most people are still seeing Go as the good guy, I mean, I'm definitely pulling for him. This is really a duel where, if you take a step back and look at it, you have two kind of bad characters, right? You have two duelists who are dueling with, anger and hatred, which usually you get one character who's at least fighting for justice, and while Go is doing that, you don't really see it through his actions. Instead, he has this mindset where he's going to do, and he even says it, whatever it takes to win. And so you have Genome, who's obviously a bad guy, and you have Go, who's a good guy, but he's dueling like a bad guy. So I thought that was also a unique take, that you kind of had two almost seemingly villains going at it. Villains on, the front. Obviously, Go is not a villain by any term of the word, but from the front, it looks like you have two villains going at it, which was very unique, and you could hear the aggression, you could hear the anger in their voice, and I also thought Genome's voice actor was really good, really kind of unnerving, and I really did like his voice actor. I liked his whole demeanor, and Kusanagi said it, I believe, but you never felt in this episode that Go was in control. You always felt that he was in the palm of Genome's hand. I think that was actually the exact quote, and that's really how you felt as the viewer. I never felt once that Go had this, was in a good position during this duel, and honestly, at the very end, I genuinely thought Genome was going to win. I'm not even kidding, and you could see Playmaker even, or Yusaku, he's not Playmaker yet, Yusaku even at the end of this episode start getting concerned, because I think he even thought that Go was going to lose. Obviously, he doesn't lose. I'm kind of all over the place with this review, but, I record all these reviews at 7:30 a.m. I wake up, watch the simulcast 6:55, record the review, edit it, go to my 10 a.m. class, get back at 1, and then I usually post it. But so sometimes my thoughts are kind of all over the place, but hopefully they're still somewhat structured. But just getting at the end of this duel, we see Go fly off the D-board pretty viciously and fall to the ground, which I thought, it's just, again, it goes back to what Ignis said in the second episode, and it almost doesn't seem like it's canon to the second episode anymore. It's not canon to this one line where Ignis said if you take serious fall damage, you can die in the real world, or you'll take real life damage in the real world. Well, Go just took serious fall damage. But then maybe it's different because they're not riding on that singular wave. But he flew to the ground, he flew across the ground, and you can actually see, and what I liked in the middle of this episode is Go was starting to pant a little bit. He was starting to seem out of breath. You could tell that the duel was having an actual physical toll on him in VRains. So when he gets back into the real world, I'm very interested to see what's going to happen to him. I mean, if he makes it back. If he loses to Genome, he might become a victim of another, and that'll be it. So he might not even make it back. So this is, as Yusaku said, I believe in episode 4, this is a matter of life or death. These duels against the Knights are a matter of life or death, and you're seeing that portrayed 19 episodes later in this episode. Two other points I'm going to make. The first one being Yusaku, the cool ending scene. It was awesome, but I honestly, I have to admit, I kind of sighed a little bit when I saw Yusaku walking towards VRains. I mean, the whole aesthetic was nice and was awesome. but I don't want him to intrude on this duel. If he goes into Link VRains to taunt Genome, if he goes into Link VRains to motivate Go and Go comes back and wins, I'm fine with that. You will not hear one complaint from me. I actually don't have any problems with that at all. But if he goes into Link VRains to intrude on this duel, which keep in mind, we don't even know if intrusions are a thing in this universe. They were a big thing in Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5. We don't know if you're allowed to intrude on duels in this universe. So let's say he goes in and he intrudes on the duel, and then it becomes a 2-on-1, or he takes over for Go. Or Go loses to Genome and then Yusaku takes over. I wouldn't like that. I really wouldn't like that. This, I feel like, is a big moment for Go's character, and I really hope that Go, especially because we don't know the kind of person Dr. Genome is going to be. We might not even see Dr. Genome for the next 50 we might not ever see him in action again, right? Because we just don't know. Like, I remember when they introduced the Doctor in Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, we thought, alright, he's gonna maybe have a really big role. He's the one that's, implanting these devices in the bracelet girls' heads and, brainwashing them. He's responsible for that. He didn't duel once. He got carded by his own boss. So, you just never know the actual role these characters are going to have. We know that Go is supposed to have a big role, so I'm just hoping that they don't give him a loss. The final point I'm going to make is the uncanny similarities between Go and Zark. And if you don't know who Zark is, Zark was the final antagonist in Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, who basically became a very dark person and basically became someone hell-bent on destruction because of the crowd's desire for pleasure and more violent entertainment. And Go literally said, I'm almost positive it was like an exact quote from Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, where he literally just goes something along the lines of, the crowd loves these violent duels, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to please the crowd, which is literally the exact mindset that Zark had before he went, off the deep end and almost destroyed everything and was the final antagonist of Arc 5. So I don't know if that is either a low-key reference to Arc 5. I don't know if that's a reference to Arc 5 and foreshadowing that Go is going to lose this duel, because it never usually doesn't pay off in Yu-Gi-Oh! To turn to darkness and turn to anger and hatred. And while Go maybe hasn't turned to that, he clearly has changed his style completely. Or if it's foreshadowing that Go might be an antagonist down the road. There's a few, or it could just mean none of the above. But I just love how you see these similarities to all the shows. We've really seen similarities to every single Yu-Gi-Oh! Show at this point. And I honestly, when I was watching that, I was like, Jesus, that is way too similar to Zark from Arc 5, and we all know what happened there. Never good to give in to anger and hatred, guys. But overall, I thought it was an enjoyable episode. Didn't really talk about the dueling action, but the attack animations were really cool. The duel was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of effect damage. I'm pretty sure that was really all it was. It was just Go injuring himself to inflict damage to Genome. Genome attacking with his clone Link monster to deal damage, and they were just kind of either taking the damage or they were, at Go at the very end reduced it in half, and that's how he was able to survive by a few hundred life points. But it was good back and forth action. My only complaint is just I wish Genome talked about his role with the Knights or promoted the Knights a little better. I just thought the DNA lines kind of got a little bland after a while, but again, very minor complaint. Overall, another really, really fun episode of VRains, and I'm excited to hear your guys' thoughts. I'm excited to talk to you down below, and I'm excited, most importantly, let me know what you think is going to happen. We know from the preview that Playmaker is going to be in the area. Do you think he's going to intrude, or do you think he's just going to be there for moral support? Please, please, God, just have him there for moral support. And finally, who do you think wins this duel? Go Onizuka or Dr. Genome? Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you down below, and I hope you have an amazing day.
「叫んでた君の声